and also Dr. Emily Landau, head of the Arms Control and Regional Security Program at the INSS. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. You know, I'm so happy that I have two women here with me in the studio, because maybe we can speak a little bit less with the bomb tone, but to speak a little bit about the diplomacy tone. And can it be solved right now when we are still reporting about soldiers being hit, when we just when people just buried their children just today and yesterday? Can diplomacy be an issue during an operation that it seems that it's not going to end anytime soon?
Well, I'm not sure that the issue that you mentioned is the reason why the two sides can't move to diplomacy right now. I think the first step, obviously, is a ceasefire, and that's what you've been discussing, and what Netanyahu is saying, and what Kerry is saying, and what other members of the government and cabinet are saying about this. It's going to end. I mean, the ceasefire is going to come sooner or later. That's clear. I think the issue right now, from Israel's point of view, is really the tunnel issue. In other words, Israel is saying that or is projecting that it would go for a ceasefire, but it can't go for a ceasefire where it can continue to destroy the tunnels. In other words, that has to be part of any ceasefire, I think, that Israel is going to agree to at this point. I think that's pretty clear. IDF is in there. We know the huge threat that these tunnels pose to Israel, and that has to be part of it. Hamas, for now, is saying no. I heard earlier today, we heard from Mahmoud Abbas's representative their idea for a ceasefire, which was immediately rejected by Hamas. So they also have their conditions. Egypt is in it. It looks like, even though it looks like there's a big mess right now, I think actually it is moving towards a ceasefire. In other words, the sides are moving not in a smooth and easy way, but bumbling towards it, but I think it is moving in that direction. And I think Israel will insist that it continues to destroy the tunnels. With that, Hamas will, it depends how much pressure is put on Hamas to agree to that.
Dr. Landau, we're always talking about the tunnels, and the tunnels are the main purpose. How come the tunnels
were not there before?
We're not there before.
Look,
how come Israel didn't know about the tunnels?
Israel knew about the tunnels, and we know that Israel knew about the tunnels. I think the only question that's really on the table is whether Israel knew the full extent of the tunnels. And here, it seems that Israel didn't know the full extent of the tunnels. Even yesterday, the tunnel that came out near the kibbutz Nahal Oz, they're saying that they didn't know about that, because each tunnel seems to have a number of exits on Israel's territory. And they seem not to have known about the extent of them.
In this
but
area
people lived there, and they were telling people about them. The IDF...
We're blamed that they're crazy, that they're hearing voices that they're not hearing.
The IDF, I think, knew about the tunnels. But, it's like... very often there are issues like this in international relations. You know about something. I mean, even if you know that there's an offensive capability that's building up, you don't necessarily... What was Israel supposed to do? To initiate an operation to destroy the tunnels? The minute it became clear with the first instance of the 13 Hamas terrorists coming out and from the tunnel and doing what they almost did, then it became something that, okay, we have to take care of this. But even if you know about that, Israel knew about the rockets, obviously. Israel knows about Hezbollah's rockets, right? We know that the rockets now in Hezbollah are, I think, 3 times what they were before the Second Lebanon War. So what do you do with that information? Do you start a war with Hezbollah? No, you know that offensive capability is there. But until you hope that your deterrence will work and that Hezbollah won't start anything, which has worked up until now. And if something starts, you'll have to deal with that. So knowing about an offensive capability doesn't mean that you're going to initiate something to deal with.
Yeah, but rockets were fired towards Israel for the last 14 years.
Right,
so
but
Israel
they learned
could retaliate and could act.
Well, that's it. So Israel
did
react to what to the attacks that were coming, and all the focus was on the rockets, because the rockets were being fired. That's exactly it.
We're talking about a lot about diplomacy, and is diplomacy the key for any solution? Right now, Israel is always saying that it will not sit with Hamas, it will not sit with a terror organization. Should Israel continue saying that? Maybe because, I'm going to be really cliche right now, but when you want to...
Can't choose your enemies.
Yes, if you want to do peace, you do it with your enemies, not with your friends.
I think that's going to be a very serious problem. I just wanted to say one thing. There's clearly the way in which most wars end these days is, of course, through diplomacy. And I think what we're seeing is very, very typical where, certainly in our wars, where now we have a situation where we want to cease fire, but we don't want it too quickly. We have to, the feeling is, the sense is, the government has said, the army has said, we've got to deal with the tunnels. And so I think we've got two things going on here, really a rush to deal with the tunnels before there's a ceasefire. The ceasefire is going to take time, in any case, first to get terms for a ceasefire, because there's no agreement yet between Hamas and Israel on this, nor with the Egyptians. So it'll take time to get it, and then we can stretch it out a little bit more to achieve whatever can be achieved. I must say, though, my feeling has been, and very much from the beginning of all of this, is that we're in a war situation, we're fighting the war, we could indeed argue over there should have been or shouldn't be a ground attack. But from the very beginning, my only sense of this has been that nothing really will be achieved, and we will have this continuous cycle over and over unless we get back to really what is the core of this thing. And the core of this is the conflict between us and the Palestinians. And the only way that's going to be resolved is clearly through diplomacy. There's no such thing, or it's very rare to have a decisive battle against guerrilla troops or whatever we want to call them, and certainly terrorists. It rarely happens. There are cases, but it's very, very rare. It's going to end only at some point with the through diplomacy, through negotiation. And here you raised a question that I think is very important. We certainly don't like Hamas, and Hamas certainly doesn't recognize Israel, is not willing to negotiate, all of these things. On the other hand, I do think there have been opportunities where we might have been able to deal with Abu Mazen, bearing in mind that there is also Hamas. In other words, I'm not entirely sure that we can ignore them or that we could have ignored them. We had, I think, an opportunity when Hamas was quite weak as a result of developments within the region, Syria, Egypt, and so forth. And so it went into this unity government, this reconciliation agreement, because it was weak. And the same way that I think Rabin, back in the 90s, chose to work with the PLO for various reasons, but one of them was that PLO had been seriously weakened, losing the Soviet Union, the Iraq War, having supported Saddam Hussein, and that was one of the considerations is, okay, this is the time to deal with them, if you're going to deal with them at all. Not that he was crazy about dealing with them. And I think that in this sense, we had this opportunity. I think it was a mistake to reject the unity government, because the unity government, at least they said, doesn't mean they necessarily would have done it, but what they said is that it would be under Abu Mazen and Abu Mazen's conditions, which were the three conditions that Israel and the Quartet had set: recognition of Israel, dealing with Israel, and so forth. Whether or not it would have happened that way remained to be seen. I think it was a mistake to ignore that or to reject it. But then I have to go to the bottom line. If we have a government that is willing to reach a peace agreement, and we know pretty much what a peace agreement is going to look like, there are concessions that are going to have to be made. Do we have a government that's willing to do it? I don't think that the present coalition was willing to do it, and therefore they had no reason to accept even this kind of a Hamas involvement.
We'll just continue to talk a little bit more about this issue. I just want to go right now live to our Icon News correspondent, Eli Ochenberg, who's standing right now in Israel-Gaza border. Can I say, Eli, a relatively quiet night?
Well, Lucy, I wouldn't say it's a still
actually hurt?
No, I think a lot of damage has been done to the
IDF forces continue their activity both inside the Gaza Strip and along the border, and will of course keep you updated with any development from here, Lucy.
Yes, Ellie Offenberg, thank you very much for this. This is day 22. How much can we say that the infrastructure of Hamas is actually hurt?
Oh, I think a lot of damage has been done to the Hamas infrastructure. I think IDF has had a lot of achievements in that regard. There's different, reports coming from Gaza all the time. There are those that are claiming that Hamas is close to, being entirely fed up with this and would like to end it. Islamic Jihad, I think the reports are that they would have ended it already almost 2 weeks ago. And Hamas, whether it's DEF leading this and Mashal and all of that dynamic. And then there are others that say, no, they want to continue on. The damage done to the infrastructure, I think, is going to be a very important part of whatever ceasefire is achieved and whatever longer-term arrangement is going to be achieved. Because Hamas is, they're leading this state. I don't know what to call them. It's a government, but it is also a terrorist organization. And we've seen throughout this operation, really, that they have no scruples. There's no values that come anywhere near the rules of the game that are used in international relations, right? We hear always about the proportionate response. Well, that's good if you're talking about two states. But when you're talking about a state versus a terrorist organization that has no qualms about doing all of the horrific things that we've been hearing about that Hamas does, you're dealing with a very different actor
exactly
here.
From that point, because we're always asking how long can Israel continue with this operation? How long can Hamas continue with this operation?
Well,
because
this is the question, but I think what's going to happen is that there are going to have to be international actors that, start becoming more prominent in this dynamic. And we're seeing already, Israel was very unhappy about the fact that Kerry seemed to be, and I'm leaving aside all the arguments whether he did or whether he didn't, but it seemed to be, especially the meeting in Paris, it seemed to be that he was moving more towards Turkey and Qatar, which obviously is a no-go for Israel. Turkey, because Erdogan is spewing anti-Semitic rants over the past 2 weeks that make him a totally unacceptable party around the table in this dynamic. Qatar for the support of Hamas, and Egypt was outside. Now it seems that it's very clear that Egypt will be a central player, and it's sort of moving in that direction. And that's why I said things, I think, are moving in that direction, keeping Egypt very much in the center of this picture. We know what Egypt thinks about Hamas. They will be putting pressure on Hamas. Having Abbas also be part of this. These are the actors that at the end of the day are going to have to carve out something, but there's going to have to be a lot of pressure on Hamas. It's not just going to be that Hamas, will surrender because of what Israel's done. It will have to be Hamas coming under the control of a number of international actors that will get the message across to Hamas that this is not going to fly anymore.
And
I think there's a broader regional dynamic that's going on. It's us and the Palestinians and what we need to reach, but the lines are changing in the Middle East, more broadly speaking, although Qatar, as you say, on the one hand, the United States doing this arms deal, on the other hand, the other dynamics. But broadly speaking, right now, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia sort of together with Israel, and maybe Abbas, I don't know to what degree, are going to be pushing in one direction, and the others, and with Iran on the sidelines. Iran, I just saw a report that they have been in constant contact with Hamas. Now, this is a new development because obviously relations had almost ended between Iran and Hamas, and now suddenly, and these things do change, but Iran is just taking the opportunity to continue to get into the act and to continue.
You know how we call it? You know how we call it in Israel? It's a big balagan. It's a big mess.
Oh, definitely.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much.